Hey Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little different as I delve into worship music. And I know a lot of you are here for my dance music reviews, and that's okay. If you really don't want to get into this, then I'd suggest clicking off. But regardless, I think this album is a really good listen, and I'm also going to be reviewing the Hillsong Worship concert I went to last night. As evidence from this shirt here, which is a Hillsong United shirt. I reviewed Empires earlier this year, but now I was actually following that. I was a lot more hyped to hear Open Heaven, River Wild by Hillsong Worship, which is kind of a live version of Hillsong United, except this album actually uses a different vocalist on every single track on this, which I thought was freaking awesome. They tend to call them worship leaders in this. I just prefer to say the lead vocalist of the track because I'm used to that from EDM and everything. Overall, even if you don't dig this album, definitely go to a Hillsong Nights event, which is what I went to last night. I went to Hillsong Nights Seattle. There's tons of people there. I think the church sits about 1,000, and probably the biggest church service per se that I've ever been to. Brian Houston, lead pastor of the Hillsong Church, also spoke, which was pretty cool. And in the tickets, they were including this new book that he wrote called Live, Love, Lead. I'm gonna read it regardless because I was thinking about reading it anyway and it came with the tickets, so really cool that they decided to do that with the event. And without further ado, I'm gonna dig into the album and the concert. So the album kicks off with Oh Praise the Name, Anástasis. Don't really know if that's how it's pronounced, but I just kind of assume. This is a really powerful song. When they released it as an Easter single, I didn't really like it as much. Basically, the first 4 tracks on the record are probably the best, this one being no exception, really. Definitely a powerful worship song, and actually, I think they opened like Brian Houston's sermon with this track, kind of sang it in the middle and then afterward too, and just kind of basically this sermon section of the show kind of centered around that, which was really cool and definitely one of the lead tracks or the highlights from last night. And we get into Love on the Line, which has a female vocalist. Forgive me if I don't remember all of them because I'm probably only going to remember the kind of highlights or the Hillsong United vocalists, since there's so many freaking vocalists on this record. It's kind of hard to keep track of all of them, especially the ones I'm not familiar with. Love on the Line is a little bit more EDM sounding, uses a lead synth, which is really cool, and just pretty powerful and pretty as a worship song. We get One Thing, which is definitely going to blow up, probably on radios and in churches as well. Just a really cool track. They just made a radio edit for it as well, I think with a different vocalist than they used on the live version of this record. And probably my favorite track, Open Heaven, River Wild, which is the title track. They sang that last night as well. And I think 3 out of these, they didn't sing Love on the Line, but 3 out of these they did do last night, and since these were my favorites on the record, it was really freaking cool to hear them in this setting. Open Heaven, River Wild kind of starts off with this kind of mellow tone, then gets into this really hard worship section, and that's what I really loved about the track. I was a tad bit disappointed with Transfiguration, which is the only track on the album which features Taya Smith, who actually had a big part in last night's show, sang Oceans, sang Even When It Hurts, Touch the Sky. She had a really big part, and I'd just like to go on a rant really quick about her. If you go to see her live, her vocals are like nothing I've ever heard before. She literally hit notes that I didn't know existed, and she has the voice of an angel, I'm not gonna lie. She's incredible. You think typically with studio recordings people are better on the studio recordings than you'll hear live. This one is the complete opposite. She is far more better live and can hit these absolutely insane notes, and her voice is just so powerful to actually hear. That was definitely one of the coolest things of the night. They also sang a few Hillsong Young and Free tracks. They did a live, they did the remix of Relentless, and they did Wake. I was hoping to hear This Is Living, but those were absolutely settling because it was one of the most energy-packed shows I've ever been to. Even though I'm really digging dance music, this section of the show, especially at the end, was one of the most energetic things I've ever been at. I was like head to toe in sweat after the show, and it was crazy. They also played Heart Like Heaven, which also features on this album, which was actually, if you remember my review of Empires, it was my least favorite track on the album, just because of its kind of generic worship nature. In this setting, it actually sounds pretty freaking good, and ended up actually being one of my favorites on the worship record just because it sounds so much better translated from a studio setting into this live setting, and I think maybe they should have saved that track. it was cool to really know that track, and when they played it at the show, I was able to know all the lyrics and everything because it's from one of my favorite albums of this year. One of the other downfalls of this record is when you hear the track Jesus, I Need You, which sounds a lot like Oh, I Need You, Oh, I Need You. There's another worship song that sounds basically the same thing and has a very similar melody. So I wasn't really impressed with that, although it is pretty catchy. The song Here With You on this one, which is also really powerful to listen to. I could potentially even hear this being on the radio or something if it was cut down a little, as the track's 4 minutes and 20 seconds long. It's a little bit long for the radio. I think if they cut it down, they could definitely make a nice radio edit off this and get some radio play, because this is a really good track that's better even outside of the worship scene. As for Brian Houston, he delivered a sermon on happiness, which was a pretty interesting topic. Typically when I hear this, people are always talking about, oh, joy is different than happiness, but he was really talking about true happiness and what it means to be happy as a believer, even using as his verse Pharrell Williams' Happy, the song, which was uncommon for pastors to do things like that, but honestly the dude was super funny. He's Australian, so it's cool to listen to his accent and how he translates his sermons to an American audience, which was totally cool. Not the best sermon I've listened to. I'm actually going to City Church where Judah Smith, who's also kind of a world-famous pastor, he is the lead pastor there, and I'm actually digging his stuff slightly more, but this was probably second best to that. Brian Houston, just a really awesome pastor, lead pastor of Hillsong Church in Australia. Like I said, the most energetic portions of this show were definitely the Hillsong Young and Free sections, and if you get a chance to go to one of these Hillsong nights, you won't be disappointed, because you're getting a perfect mix of Hillsong United live, you're getting a perfect mix of Hillsong worship. They didn't actually play Broken Vessels, which was a little disappointing, but regardless, still pretty cool. You're getting Hillsong Young and Free, you're getting some of these classic hits, you're getting new stuff, and it's just a perfect mix of everything you could possibly want at a worship show. Probably in my top 5 or maybe even 3 shows period ever that I've been to, and probably my top worship show ever, maybe next to Chris Tomlin, who I saw back in Soulfest a couple years ago, which was also a pretty insane show. But this one, I just couldn't stop the energy. I could really feel something, probably the Holy Spirit, honestly, moving in this one. Like I said, if you're not into that, just enjoy this for the music. Don't necessarily go to a Hillsong worship show. I mean, although it is really powerful, you might be a little biased toward it, but if you really dig this album and really like what their message is, then definitely go to a Hillsong worship show. It's definitely going to be worth it, and you're going to hear just such an awesome mix with energy, and just the place is packed full of Christians who want to spend their time worshiping, time and money especially, and you'll get the free book too. So honestly, there's really not much to miss out on. Like, you wouldn't want to miss this. If it comes to your city or something, I think there's only a couple more cities left, but if you're watching this in anticipation for going to see Hillsong, don't have any regrets, get hyped. The album itself, I think, is fairly solid, although the second half is pretty generic. I think worship music, it does have some good ones. The first half I liked a little bit better. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, and I think that's a pretty fair rating. I had originally given Empires an 8.0, and I think that was some of the best worship music that's ever been released. This one took a little bit more of a generic spin, so I think honestly a 7.5 is completely fair. As for the concert, I'd probably give this a solid 9. Like I said, not the best show I've ever been to. That actually might be Skrillex or Deadmau5. They played some really hard stuff, and I went absolutely nuts over Skrillex. But as for this one, I went just about as nuts. The first half wasn't as exciting because it was a seated concert, and I was way in the friggin' back. At the end, which was the second half, obviously, if I was stuck in the back the whole time, my rating might have even been lower than this. They let us all rush to the front and really pump out to some awesome worship music, like the track With Everything. That's one of my new favorites. And then they had, of course, the Young and Free section, which I went absolutely nuts over for 2 straight tracks. Just an insane experience, and definitely go see this. Like I said, one of my favorites ever. If it would have been a standing room concert the entire time, it probably would have been a 9.5 out of 10, but we got stuck in the back, so it just really wasn't as easy to get into it when everyone's just kind of separated, and I don't really like how that works with a typical church setting. Overall, it was a really awesome experience, so go do that. If you have to, pay more so you can get up front, although they're probably going to let you do the same thing. You get a free book, and this experience is just going to be really awesome. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this review of Hillsong Worship Open Heaven, River Wild, and the Hillsong Nights tour in Seattle. See you guys later. Peace.